Do you see anybody in the political landscape who seems to be doing that?
One of the examples that I've been using of somebody whom I like and would like to see perhaps run for president is a guy like Mitch Daniels in Indiana. Mitch is in a state that went decisively for Obama, and yet he was reelected governor with a higher margin than his initial election. He was elected governor in, I'm pretty sure it was 2004, and at a time when Indiana was already, I mean, Indiana is part of the Rust Belt too. Indiana had a terrible deficit. It had state spending was out of control. State services were not great. Mitch has done, he's gotten rid of that deficit. He's cut back the state payroll. And he managed to do it in a way that I'm sure was not painless in Indiana, but he managed to explain what he was doing well enough to the people of Indiana that they reelected him, and reelected him with a larger margin. And he's not a guy who raises his voice very often. He's not a shouter.
Mm-hmm. I've noticed one of the people who's been wildly popular, at least online too, Mitch Daniels is one, although outside of the political wonkish world, I'm not sure that people know Mitch Daniels.
No, he's not very well known. He's
Yeah.
not. He's not a guy who thrusts himself into the spotlight unnecessarily. At any rate, you know.
Right.
I mean, he's a politician. He doesn't mind
Right.
attention, you know. But
Sure.
I mean, he's he's human. But he's not somebody. He's not a camera hog.
Right. Well, the other person who's kind of exciting people is Christie, and one thing I've noticed about him, although he's a Jersey guy, you know, which makes him a little bit more intense, is he is willing to go out and have the conversations. Like, I was very impressed with him going and talking to the firefighters
Yeah.
and explaining to them.
Mm-hmm. That you couldn't have everything.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, this
Yeah.
the reality of things, and I was thinking our next executive, the next president of the United States is going to have to be willing to have these tough conversations, I think.
Explain the pain.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to hurt. It's going to hurt to contract the size of politics and the expense of politics. It's going to hurt all of us to one extent or another. The upside of this is going to be much greater opportunity in America, a much stronger, more prosperous nation, but there's no doubt about it in the short term, or even the not so short term, this is going to hurt. We're probably going to have to move our retirement age up a bit. We're probably going to have to rein in the amount of coverage that Medicare provides. We're going to probably have to means test some of our benefit packages all down the road. And you need a guy who's tough enough to, and I think Christie is he the kind of personality that translates to the rest of America? I haven't seen enough of him in action to know. I mean, is he too much of a Jersey guy? I'm not positive, but he is tough. Some people argue that he's a little too that he isn't ideological enough, that he's more of a technocrat. I'm not so sure. I mean, we have some severe technical problems. You know, there's worse things to have than a technocrat. And another well-known technocrat and well-respected technocrat would be Mitt Romney. But Mitt Romney instituted what was essentially Obamacare in Massachusetts, and it's been going long enough that we know that it's not working the way he said it was going to work. It's costing more than it was supposed to cost. It isn't as effective as it was. It's driving insurance companies out of Massachusetts and raising insurance rates in Massachusetts to very high levels. So I think that's people say, oh, there are certain things that Mitt being a Mormon, I really I don't think it's ever going to get to whether Mitt's a Mormon. I think his health care plan in Massachusetts is the albatross that he's got around his neck.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, page 255, the fix is in. You said reform movements, or on page 254 you said this, reform movements can't save us. And of course my thought was the Tea Party movement, and which I would think that libertarians would love, but some of the libertarians I know, for whatever reason, somehow are irked or it's not an intellectual enough movement, or it's just,
Yes,
I don't know what the problem is really.
I would say that if you're looking why the Libertarians haven't embraced the Tea Party the way one might expect that they would was because Tea Party is not a particularly intellectual movement. That said, the Tea Party people I've talked to are pretty good scholars of the Constitution. I mean, if you were to go to the average smarty pants liberal elite education, went to Yale or wherever, Harvard Law, and said, what amendment in the Bill of Rights separates church and state? Where's the separation of church and state in the Bill of Rights? 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 would say the First Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
Average Tea Party person, maybe just squeaked through high school, will tell you it's not in there. There is no amendment in the Constitution that separates church and state.
Right.
What the amendment says is that the state will not set up a church.
Right.
That we will not have a single official church in the United States. They're good little scholars. Get them on stipulated powers in the 10th Amendment. So I think that libertarians who love arcane arguments and airtight logic and so on are maybe being a little snobbish about this. There's another problem, though, with any populist movement.
Mm-hmm.
Any populist movement attracts a certain amount of flakes. And we can go through the history of populist movements in the United States, from Jacksonian Democrats through the William Jennings Bryan, agrarian, for that matter, even the abolitionist movement. Were they wrong? No. Was John Brown, crazy as a rat in a coffee can? Yes. The civil rights movement, certainly cannot be faulted morally. Had its share of flakes. Populist movements attract a certain amount of people, wearing tinfoil on their head so that the CIA can't capture their brainwaves, and the Tea Party, of course, has that problem. That shouldn't detract from the basic Tea Party message. But what I was saying about reform movements here really is that reform movements, the tendency of reform movements is to attempt to gain power,
Right.
gain political power. And I want to see a diminishment of political power. And in this respect, I will say the Tea Party is a very unusual populist movement in that it is not asking for more from government. Populist movements traditionally ask for something from government. Now, they may be right or they may be wrong. I mean, for instance, the civil rights movement was a populist movement, and they were asking for rule of law. They were asking that all people in America be made equal before the law, the way the Constitution and the amendments to the Constitution promise that we shall be. And that was right. And they were right to ask it, and it was right that they achieved it. Nonetheless, they were asking for something from government. So it isn't necessarily that it's wrong to ask for something from government, but it's a very unusual for a populist movement to ask for less from government. Mm-hmm. Give us less. Go away. Get out of our lives. I was saying this once to some group of people I was talking to. I said something like, show me any other time in the history of America where there's been a populist movement that didn't want something from government. Somebody in the back of the room yelled, the Whiskey Rebellion. Good point, good point.
Yeah, well, that's about it. So do you think that the Tea Party movement is going to be effective, or,
I think it's been effective already.
In fusing like the Republican Party, do you think that they'll be successful in pushing back the power? As they go into power, will they
be corrupted by power?
Yes, will they restrict power?
I mean, some Tea Party candidates doubtless will end up drinking the Kool-Aid in Washington. Mm-hmm. It invariably happens. I think their general tendency is to push the Republican Party back to its core principles and away from its infatuation with big government. I think it also strengthens the hands of conservative Democrats because There is, among the Blue Dog Democrats, there are people who are strongly populist and yet are also very conservative, and they're not necessarily such a bad fit with the Tea Party people. So I think the overall influence is going to be very good. Will there be specific instances of the influence not being good? Yes, in the sense that, say for instance in Nevada, I think the Tea Party managed to find perhaps the single solitary person in Nevada who couldn't beat Harry Reid with both hands tied behind his or her back. Now, Harry Reid may get beat yet, and that would be great, and I certainly hope he does. But I'm not sure the Tea Party was helpful in finding the strongest candidate against Harry, because that guy really needs to go.
Right,
So,
in a major way.
yeah,
It's my number one race.
Yeah, and so in some cases, like many idealistic things in life, idealism does have a tendency to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And we have to remember that politics is a sloppy and approximate, and we've got to be careful not to let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Okay, well, I want to thank you very much for your time with me
You're
today.
very welcome.
It's a real pleasure,
You're very
and
welcome.
I hope everybody who's listening to this will go out and read this book. Don't vote. It just encourages the bastards. It's one of the more thoughtful things I've read recently, and yet I found myself laughing out loud nearly every single page. There was something that
Well, thank you.
got me. So thank you very much for joining me.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.